the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, joins me. Lovely to see you this morning. She's also the Conservative MP for Sevenoaks. Hello, Minister. Nice to see you. Look, the Prime Minister has said this morning he's going to stick with his 5-point plan because the plan is working. The only problem with that, of course, is that the plan isn't working. I've just heard from Matt Goodwin, who's done a lot of polling to suggest he hasn't shifted the dial at all with the electorate. And equally, yes, he's brought down inflation, but the other 4 points remain to be fulfilled, and it's already a new year.
Well, look, Camilla, what we've seen in the last year since Rishi became Prime Minister is that the economy has turned a corner. You know, in the year and a bit ago when he took over, we were forecast to have the biggest recession that we've seen in 100 years. Inflation was over 11%. You know, we've now seen growth in the economy, you know, albeit small, and we want it to be more. And also, we've seen inflation come down. That's really important, and it's really important for people at home. So it is working. I know you were going to raise with me NHS waiting list, quite rightly, because we have seen a really big impact as a result of the strikes. But what we've seen is where we haven't had those strikes, we are starting to make progress on the waiting list. So we hope that can get resolved, and we can continue on with that. And then on stopping the boats, obviously the numbers have come down of illegal migration over here by over a third last year, at a time when it's going up by 80% in countries like Italy. But we want to go further. We know we need to do more, and that's why we've introduced the legislation into the House of Commons to stop the boats. So we really are seeing progress. I know there's more to be done, and that's the argument that we're going to be making over the next year. OK, I mean, we'll come on to the boats in just a moment, but you can't be happy with the growth forecasts. I mean, they're flatlining. Growth isn't growing. I mean, there's not increased growth forecast for the next 5 years. It's basically this. That's not something you can be happy with. I totally get what you're saying. What I would point out is that the economy has had a really difficult time over the past few years. People at home have had a really difficult time. We've had the after effects of COVID, and then we've had the energy price shock. As I said, just over a year ago, we were forecast to have the biggest recession in 100 years last year. We've managed to avoid that. Now, you are absolutely right that we want to do more to encourage growth. That's why at the autumn statement, we took a number of measures, including the biggest tax cut for business ever in terms of full expensing. You know, the OBR have said that the measures that we took over the last year will increase growth significantly by the biggest amount ever as a result of fiscal events. So we're doing all that we can to boost growth because we know how important it is for the economy.
I mean, you talked about the Stopping the Boats plan, which we know is one of Rishi Sunak's points in his 5-point plan. Having said that, the BBC has discovered that there are documents which suggest that he doesn't actually support the Rwanda plan. He was sceptical about the cost. He didn't even think it would act as a deterrent. So the Prime Minister doesn't believe, really, does he, in one of the government's flagship policies?
No, that's not true. I think when you're in the Treasury, you know, my job at the moment, I'm Chief Secretary to the Treasury, I am literally sceptical about most aspects of government spending. I will sit there, I will look at it, I will assess its value for money on every single aspect. So I am sure that he was asking a lot of questions about the policy. But look at his actions, look what he's done. You know, he's introduced the illegal migration bill into the House of Commons, the Rwanda bill, which will introduce Rwanda to this country and will mean that we overturn the issues that were raised by the Court of Appeal. It will mean that flights can take off to Rwanda, which we think is incredibly important because we know deterrence works. We've seen what happened with the Albania deal, where they do get returned to their country of origin, and numbers of Albanians coming over here has reduced by 90%. So this is why it's so important that we get the Rwanda bill through.
I know, but at the same time, Labour are now asking the government to publish some of this paperwork. I mean, will you do that? Because it's not really necessarily about him looking at the finer details. It was basically expressing a view that he didn't think the plan would actually work. And actually, he's been vindicated in that, hasn't he? I mean, you have sent more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than you have deportees.
Well, I mean, Labour will do literally anything to avoid talking about what their actual plan is, and that's because they don't have one on illegal migration. We do. That's why we're putting the Rwanda bill through the House. It's obviously not up and running yet, which is why we haven't seen people sent over there, but we hope it passes the House very soon, and then we can get these flights taking off.
Do you think that the Chancellor should scrap inheritance tax in the next budget? I know you're going to say, I can't predict what the Chancellor's going to do in the next budget, but what I'd like from you, Laura Trott, is a personal opinion as to whether you think IHT is fair.
No, I don't think it's a fair tax, but I think, I don't like a lot of other taxes as well. And what we want to do as a government is bring taxation down, but in a fair way and in a way which is fiscally responsible when it is appropriate to do so. We will not risk fueling inflation again, and that is what we've seen. In other countries across Europe, we've seen inflation come down and then start going back up again. That is absolutely not something we're prepared to risk as a government.
What's the fairest way to deal with income tax increases then? Because we're going to see 3 million more people fiscally dragged over the next 5 years into that upper bracket. Is it fair for people on 52 grand a year to be taxed 40%?
Look, Camilla, I'm a Conservative. I believe in low taxes, but I also believe in paying back our debts. And we had to take some really difficult decisions to pay back our COVID debts. We spent £400 billion during COVID. We spent £100 billion on helping people with their energy bills. Those were, I think, the right decisions, but they've got to be paid back. That is the difference between us and Labour. Now, we're starting to do that now. We're starting, as I said, to see the economy turning a corner, which is why we're able to talk about tax cuts. But I don't shy away from the fact that we had to take some really difficult decisions in the interim.
I've had a couple of Tory MPs on this morning talking about Chris Skidmore standing down, resigning, saying that he's guilty of a betrayal of Rishi Sunak. Do you agree with that?
Look, Chris was a colleague, but I fundamentally disagree with him. I think he's just plain wrong in what he says. We and everybody knows that actually when it comes to 2050, when we come to net zero, we're still going to be using some fossil fuels, right? That is accepted by every expert committee. And it is obviously better that where those fossil fuels do have to be used, then they are produced domestically because we know that results in lower emissions. So it's right from our carbon emission targets, and it's right for our energy security that we produce things domestically, and I think most people at home would understand that.
And a final thought, if you wouldn't mind, Laura Trott, on the post office scandal. We've got talk of the police investigating. I know your colleague Jeremy Hunt's talk about compensation. We've got 600,000 people now supporting a petition to have Paula Venables, the former CEO of the post office, stripped of her CBE. Presumably you support that.
Look, the Post Office have clearly behaved abysmally throughout all of this. This has been an enormous miscarriage of justice, and I'm glad to see it's getting the attention that it rightly deserves.
Paula Venables, though.
Individuals, there's a process for that. There's so in terms of individuals, turning to a specific question, there's a process for that in terms of an honours committee for look at forfeiture. There's also an inquiry going on, so it wouldn't be right for me to comment on individuals.
Laura Trott, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.